Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 12, and the text is 16. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nenivar Tata Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Manaha Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nanivartata Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Mana Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nenivartata Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Mana. Please chant. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nanivartata Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Mana. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nanivartate Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Mana. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Samsaya Shrinvato Vacham Tava Yogeshvareshvara Nanivartata Atmasto Yena Brahmyati Me Mana. Thank you very much. The word for word, Shri Uddhava Uvacha. Shri Uddhava said, Samsaya, doubt, Shrinvata, of the one who is hearing, Vacham, the words, Tava, your, Yoga Ishvara, of the lords of mystic power, Ishvara, you who are the Lord, Na nivartate, will not go away, Atma, in the heart, Sta, situated, Yena, by which, Brahmyati, is bewildered, Me, my, Mana, mind. In the translation, this is by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, as is the purport. Shri Uddhava said, O Lord of all masters of mystic power, I've heard your words, but the doubt in my heart does not go away. Thus my mind is bewildered. In the purport, In the first verse of the 10th chapter of this canto, the Lord stated that one should take shelter of him and execute one's duties within the Varnashram system without material desire. Uddhava interpreted this statement as recommending karma mishra bhakti, or devotional service mixed with a tendency towards fruitive activities. It is a fact that until one understands Lord Krishna to be everything, it is not possible to retire from ordinary worldly duties. Rather, one is encouraged to offer the fruits of such work to the Lord. In verse 4 of the 10th chapter, the Lord recommended that one retire from worldly duties and systematically cultivate knowledge, accepting him as the supreme. Uddhava understood this instruction to indicate Jnana Mishra Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord, mixed with the secondary desire to accumulate knowledge. Beginning with verse 35 of the 10th chapter, Uddhava inquired about the process of material conditioning and liberation from material life. The Lord replied elaborately, stating that without devotional service, the process of philosophical speculation can never be perfected. In chapter 11, verse 18, the Lord emphasized the importance of faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in verse 23, Krishna extensively widened his discussion of devotional service, emphasizing that one should be faithful and hear and chant the glories of the Lord. The Lord concluded that both the development and perfection of devotional service depend on association with the devotees. In verse 26 of the 11th chapter, Uddhava inquired about the actual ways and means of devotional service and about the symptoms of devotional perfection. And in verse 46, Lord Krishna stated that unless one takes to the process of devotional service, one's attempts for liberation will be useless. One must associate with the devotees of the Lord and follow in their footsteps. Finally, in verse 14 of this chapter, the Lord categorically rejected the paths of fruitive activities and mental speculation, and in verse 15 recommended that one exclusively surrender unto him with all one's heart. Having received such elaborate and technical instructions on the perfection of life, Uddhava is bewildered, and his mind is afflicted with doubt about what he should actually do. Lord Krishna has described many procedures and the results of such procedures, all of which ultimately lead to the single goal of Lord Krishna himself. Uddhava therefore desires that Lord Krishna state in simple terms what should be done. Arjuna makes a similar request of the Lord at the beginning of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Uddhava is stating here, "My dear friend Krishna, first you recommended that I perform worldly activities within the Varnashram system, and then you advised that I reject such activities and take to the path of philosophical research. Now, rejecting the path of Jnana, you recommend that I simply surrender unto you in Bhakti Yoga. If I accept your decision, in the future you may again go back to your original point and recommend worldly activities." By his boldness in disclosing his mind, Uddhava reveals his intimate friendship with Lord Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimad Ramapada Swami Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation once again of Uddhava's statement to Lord Krishna for this text 16. Sri Uddhava said, O Lord of all masters of mystic power, I've heard your words, but the doubt in my heart does not go away. Thus my mind is bewildered. So looking to Srila Jiva Goswami, he states that Uddhava is saying the following. So the acharyas often rephrase, and this is his rephrasing of Uddhava's statement. Through hearing and understanding your words, I still have doubts. I cannot understand what you said. So that's today's verse. Uddhava's saying he can't understand what Krishna said. So this is because your statements, such as this statement, bewilder my mind. So he's giving the reason for why it's difficult for him to understand. His mind feels very bewildered. So there's a particular part in the same chapter, just a little bit earlier, where we actually hear something of Krishna making the connection between Uddhava and something of his devotional sentiments. So here's Krishna beginning that or making that connection because he's connecting Uddhava to the gopis. So this was a little bit earlier. The residents of Vrindavan, headed by the gopis, were always completely attached to me with deepest love. Therefore, when my uncle Akura brought my brother Balaram and me to the city of Mathura, the residents of Vrindavan suffered extreme mental distress because of separation from me and could not find any other source of happiness. So this is Krishna beginning to touch on something of the internal emotions connected to practicing devotional sentiments towards him. And Uddhava, he responds, when he hears Krishna bring this up, he says, thinking of what happened to the gopis, association with you, I cannot maintain my composure. That's his response. So this is very interesting because in this particular verse, there's mention that Uddhava is revealing something of his sentiments towards Lord Krishna. So I thought it's interesting to just look a little bit at those deeper emotional devotional sentiments of Uddhava. So when Uddhava had been sent by Krishna to Vrindavan to deliver a message to the gopis, Uddhava had a particular response to what Krishna called the mental disturbance of the gopis, because as were Krishna's words, mental disturbance, that's just what I read to you. They suffered extreme mental distress. So this of course was not ordinary mental distress. And Uddhava was in fact supremely pleased when he actually saw the gopis. So here he's understanding that they're experiencing mental distress, but he's feeling pleased when he sees them. And the reason this is so is because he's understanding that they've actually reached the highest state of loving ecstasy towards Lord Krishna. So to explain his feelings, he in fact sang some verses to himself internally to remind himself of what the position of the gopis is. So here's one of those verses he was singing to himself at that time when he's confronted by supposedly external mental distress, but he's having the proper understanding that actually it's a kind of loving ecstasy towards Lord Krishna, a very elevated stage that the gopis are in the whole process of bhakti yoga. So this is what he sings to himself while he's there. This is just to look a little bit at something of the sentiments of Uddhava himself. So this is what he's singing. Among all persons on earth, these cowherd women have actually perfected their embodied lives. They have achieved the perfection of unalloyed love for Lord Govinda. Their pure love is hankered after by those who fear material existence, by great sages and by ourselves as well. For one who has tasted the narrations of the infinite Lord, what is the use of taking birth as a high-class brahmana or even as Lord Brahma? So he's singing this to himself. You know, it's this reminder of the position of the gopis while he's there in Vrindavan. This is one of them. There's a whole series of them, but that's just one of them. Just to get an idea of Uddhava's own grasp of what he's actually seeing, and also the fact that he's seen himself as somebody who actually is aspiring to be in that kind of position, to have this unalloyed love for Lord Govinda. There's nothing else. So Srila Vishwanath, so I'm just drawing a little bit on Srila Vishwanath because the whole class is really Srila Jiva Goswami's looking at what we're studying today. He states that Uddhava uses, and these are his words, crooked words. So this text that we're reading today, Srila Vishwanath calls these words as a little crooked, meaning there seems to be a little discrepancy where Uddhava is saying that, you know, his mind is very bewildered, he can't understand what Krishna has said. When you actually understand that he's got like deep understanding of devotional sentiments, just by his, you know, capturing how he understood the gopis when he saw them who were supposedly in a state of mental distress. So just looking at this idea that his words are a little off kilter, there's this understanding that his emotional sentiment is one of Sakya Ras. It's defined as service in a mood of friendship and well-wishing. That's his mood with Krishna. There's friendship, there's a mood of well-wishing. And of course, that's reciprocated with Krishna. He's also treating Uddhava as a friend, as somebody that he wishes well towards him. So this is a kind of fraternal love of Lord Krishna, and the impetus for that sentiment of devotional love is Krishna himself. So it's not surprising that all of Uddhava, everything he does, he's addressing Krishna, and Krishna's reciprocating in a very friendly mood, like friends. You know, you speak in a very, it appears almost equal. A thought is expressed, a counter thought is expressed. It's a very happy, well-wishing kind of exchange. Now, in Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada, his summary study of Srila Rupa Goswami's work, he explains that when somebody is liberated and discovers his eternal relationship with Lord Krishna himself becomes that impetus for increasing fraternal love. So that's what happens to Uddhava, because we just heard that when Krishna narrated about the condition of the gopis and their mental distress, Uddhava immediately said, you know, he's lost all composure. So it's very reciprocal. There's like perfect understanding in the exchange. And it increases his love for Lord Krishna. Actually, that's what's happening. That's why his words appear off kilter. His love is increasing every time Krishna responds to him. So sometimes it says, in Nectar of Devotion, it's Krishna's exhibition of expert knowledge that provokes this fraternal love. And also his behavior as a conjugal lover, because, Uddhava's understood it just by, I've brought up how Uddhava understood the gopis, and he understood it was the gopis' connection with Krishna. So he's understanding that Krishna's behavior is as a conjugal lover, and he's also understanding, and it's also what's sort of increasing his love for Krishna, it's Krishna's intelligence. So, and those are the particular things that heighten this kind of love, of friendship that Uddhava feels towards Lord Krishna. So of course we get a wonderful display of Krishna's expert knowledge and intelligence through these various texts. And it's Srila Jiva Goswami who goes and looks carefully how one statement of Lord Krishna is connected with Uddhava, how there's this interplay on a sort of, it appears almost equal level. And Lord Krishna did indeed exhibit his expert knowledge, we can say that. He had spoken of karma mishra bhakti. So it means one is working, one's doing devotional work, but one is working, so there's like a little mix of still, one's fruitive activities. And he said this on this topic. This is what Krishna told Uddhava. Taking full shelter in me, with the mind carefully fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, as spoken by me. This is Krishna talking. One should live without personal desire and practice the social and occupational system called varnashram. So that was a statement of Lord Krishna. It was in the 10th chapter of, of this 11th canto, the 10th chapter. And interestingly, one may examine what is the relationship between friendship and equality. I've been hinting at it. What is that relationship between friendship and equality? In modern society, with a constitution such as where we live in the United States of America, there's a belief that all men are equal before the law, and there is the corollary that no man is above the law. So the law is what actually equalizes everyone. So it becomes interesting combining this notion of equality with an intimate relationship such as friendship. So Lord Krishna makes clear his position. According to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I'm yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So this is a very interesting thing, because we're looking at this idea of equality. Is there equality actually in the friendship? And we're hearing that Krishna is saying he's created this system where there's the three modes of material nature operating, and then the work that's associated with being in a particular mode predominantly. And Srila Prabhupada makes a most wonderful connection that sort of makes it clear that there's not actual equality here when we're talking in this friendship, because Lord Krishna is the creator of everything. Means everything's born of him, and everything is sustained by him, and everything after annihilation rests in him. Therefore, he's also the creator of the four divisions of society. That's the connection that Srila Prabhupada makes. So he broadens the whole scope of the picture, understanding what Krishna's actual position is. So beginning with the Brahmanas with the way of being in goodness, followed by the Kshatriyas, the administrators, with the way of being in passion, followed by the Vaishyas, the mercantile persons, with a way of being that's both in passion and ignorance, and then it's followed by the laborers, the category of persons who are situated in ignorant way of being. All of this is actually created, the system is created by Lord Krishna. So Uddhava falls into the Kshatriya category because he's an exalted member of the court in Dwarka. He's an important minister in worldly political affairs, in world political affairs. So this is the same person who has the spiritual urge to offer his obeisances to the glorious gopis, although they are externally merely cowherd girls in a small village. So, very interesting. And here he speaks of losing his composure when he hears Lord Krishna speak of these cowherd girls. So, clearly, there's a whole component that transcends even the Varnashram system and the divisions in the Varnashram system according to one's progression on the path of Bhakti Yoga and one's elevation in terms of one's relationship and sentiments towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Uddhava has heard Lord Krishna also say that all karma should be given up. So, work should be given up. Krishna's made the statement, this Varnashram system exists, you must do all your work within the Varnashram system, but he also tells Uddhava that all karma should be given up, all work should be given up. So this is what Krishna says. So I'm taking Srila Jiva Goswami, looking at this notion of friendship between Uddhava and Lord Krishna and how it's playing itself out. So Krishna says this, one who has fixed me within his mind as the goal of his life should give up activities based on sense gratification and should instead execute work governed by the regulative principles for advancement. So when, however, one is fully engaged in searching out the ultimate truth of the soul, one should not accept the scriptural injunctions governing fruitive activities. So see the subtle distinction that's been made? It's actually, you don't go along with those laws, you could say, that govern regular work within the particular societal division that you're in. When you start to fix your mind on Krishna as the goal, at that time, you actually don't do your activities with some idea that you're going to gratify your own senses, but rather you execute your work according to the regulative principles for spiritual advancement. Means that your focus is not on gratifying your senses as you're performing the work, because that's generally what happens in that societal Varnashram system. There's still that mixture of, you're performing your work and something is of the result maybe coming to you, so there's a bit of a mix. But if you fix your mind on Krishna, the idea is that you're not doing your activities. You give up the idea that you're doing your activities to gratify your own senses. So that was in the 10th chapter of this canto. So the person dedicated to Lord Krishna gives up karmas, meaning work for material results. He performs karmas, works without desire. And if one is fixed in him completely, he gives up karmas completely, meaning work completely. But that's if one is fixed completely in Lord Krishna. So without taking shelter of him, all these karmas become useless. So that's very interesting. It's actually essential to take shelter of Lord Krishna when one is even within the Varnashram system. So Lord Krishna speaks of the person who has attained steady meditation as somebody who isn't attached to sense objects, nor is the person looking to perform actions to get those objects, because those are the objects that will give pleasure to the senses. So that's the person who's become completely steady in their meditation on Lord Krishna. So desiring to rise to steady meditation, the cause of one's elevation is actually action or karma, because that's what purifies the heart. But the purification is because one is doing it, fixing one's mind on Lord Krishna. So one can ask, does friendship involve shared feelings? And does the same not apply to equality? So when Uddhava asked about the jiva's bondage, Krishna discussed the bound and liberated jiva, giving his final conclusion. So here's what Uddhava said: "O my Lord, a living entity situated within the material body is surrounded by the modes of nature and the happiness and distress that are born of activities caused by these modes. How is it possible that he's not bound by the material encirclement?" So Uddhava asked a very logical question. Because naturally, any activity is going to bind one, be it good or bad. That action produces some reaction, so one is bound then, because then you have to suffer either the happiness or the distress that comes from that action. So he wants to know, how is it possible that one is not bound by the material encirclement? So it's like he sees it as like you're encircled, you're closed in actually. So it may also be said that the living entity is ultimately transcendental and has nothing to do with the material world. Then how is he ever bound by material nature? So this is Uddhava's question. If the living entity really is transcendental, then how is he ever bound by material nature? It's a very interesting question. So if the argument is that the living entity is like the sky, which never mixes with any other object, then he is not bound. Then one may ask how such a transcendental living entity can ever be bound by material nature. So Uddhava is presenting this question to the supreme spiritual authority in order to clarify the path of Krishna consciousness. So, so you see here there's this idea of Krishna being a supreme authority. So it's not on an equal footing, even though on the spiritual plane, there's a sense of equality through the friendship. He can ask these questions. Krishna can happily respond. So there's a sense of equality, but it's not equality from the factual sense. So Lord Krishna, as the expert intelligence, he states that the material modes are under his control. And it is in this way that the living entity is sometimes designated as conditioned and sometimes as liberated. So even he's in control of how that encirclement takes place for each living entity. And in actual fact, the soul is never really bound up or liberated. And Krishna puts it this way, these are his words: "Since I am the supreme lord of Maya, which is the cause of the modes of nature, and also am never to be considered to be I am never to be considered to be liberated or in bondage." So notice, always that emphasis where Krishna points out his position. So there isn't actually equality, because he says he's never actually liberated or in bondage. He's the one who's actually the cause of the modes of material nature. So equality is there on the soul level in terms of not being under the modes of nature, but the equality and no equality in the area of control of Maya. So interesting. So Lord Krishna, in the mood of friendship with Uddhava, tells him that one cannot become perfected without bhakti. And this is how he puts it: if one is skillful in knowing Vedic scriptures and Brahman, but not skillful in devotion to the Supreme Lord, the result of one's effort is nullified. He's like a person who, desiring milk, maintains a cow which does not bear calves. So that's how Krishna explains it, that you can't become perfect without bhakti. So everywhere the same one entity is spread, so there's not equality in friendship. Krishna is spread everywhere. There's not equality in that friendship in the proper sense. So Uddhava, in his Sakya mood with Lord Krishna, asks him about the best bhakti and the best devotee. We want to go to the perfect example. So Lord Krishna, answering in the mood of friendship, he tells Uddhava, a person with natural faith should constantly hear topics about me, should sing and remember my topics, which purify the world and enact my exploits and birth. He should perform dharma, karma, and artha as service to me, having taken shelter of me. He will attain permanent bhakti to me, whose form is permanent. Always Krishna does the separation. My form is permanent. This is the way to come to the best bhakti. This is Lord Krishna's response to Uddhava: sing and remember my topics, because they purify the whole world. And one had that experience recently on being on a procession in the south side of Chicago. Just the fact that one is singing the Maha Mantra, so it's Krishna's name, asking him for being able to have service to serve him. It actually was visibly purifying the entire area of those 2 miles. I mean, one could see that persons, they weren't like pausing, what's this? Immediately they would start waving, happily smiling. So that purification is what happens, and this is what Krishna is answering to Uddhava, what's the best bhakti? It's the best bhakti is singing and remembering topics about him, because this purifies the world. So even if internally one is remembering Krishna, that's purifying the atmosphere. Now Uddhava asks Krishna to again teach thoroughly, since his mind is confused. And there was mention made that Arjuna, in the beginning of the 3rd chapter, he has that same thing. He says, I've heard so many terms. Please clarify things for me. Please, speak again. So Uddhava says he's perplexed. And this is because he's not able to grasp the final conclusion of this topic. So he says, I have heard imperfectly, though I have heard. So he's understanding there's realization that needs to happen. You can hear, and you can hear perfectly, but still there's, you can feel you've heard imperfectly because you need to understand it more deeply. So a person is considered to be completely liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies when all the functions of his vital energy, senses, mind, and intelligence are performed without material desire. That's the definition of actually being liberated. So that's one of the things that come up. Such a person, although situated within the material body, is not entangled. So that's the long, this long narration, and Uddhava wanting to, saying that he doesn't understand properly and wanting to know what's the best devotee. So here's that particular statement of Lord Krishna, that one is completely liberated from the gross and subtle material body when all the functions of his vital energy, senses, mind, and intelligence are performed without material desire. So how are you using your senses? How are you using your mind? How are you using your intelligence? It has to be performed without material desire. That's what makes one a liberated person. So that's what doesn't allow one to be entangled or encircled by the workings of the material modes of nature. So the final conclusion that Uddhava, in his mood of friendship, not understanding, is this: a faithful person who constantly hears, glorifies, and remembers such transcendental activities, who through Dramatic performance relives my pastimes, beginning with my appearance, and he takes full shelter of me, dedicating his religious, sensual, and occupational activities for my satisfaction, certainly obtains unflinching devotional service to me, the eternal personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna, a little bit further on in the 23rd and 24th verse, we'll come to here. So this explanation is that one's religious activity should be in connection with Lord Krishna. So giving in charity, which is considered like a religious activity, giving clothing and grains, it should all be done to the Vaishnavas and Brahmanas. And one should arrange for the protection, if it's possible, of cows who are very dear to Lord Krishna. And satisfying oneself should be done through taking the Lord's prasadam. And one should decorate oneself with the deity's garland and place the remnant of the deity's clothing on one's body. One should convert one's residence into a temple for Lord Krishna, and money should be used to promote the missionary activities of the devotees. And because the Lord is fixed in knowledge and bliss, there is no possibility of disturbance for the devotee who worships the Lord. So that's actually the final conclusion of how it's possible to not be disturbed at all. So that was a breakdown of today, Uddhava's particular statement. If there's some thoughts on this subject matter, please feel free.
One can be, in one sense, grateful, well, not in one sense, completely grateful to Uddhava, Sri Uddhava, in the same way to Arjuna, to facilitate receiving the instructions of Krishna. You know, when we analyze both of these great personalities, and in this case Uddhava, it is already understood that they are in the highest position of devotional service. And they're expressing, at least, you know, by the arrangement of Krishna, then they express bewilderment, not understanding or being confused about this, you know, position of devotional service, which doesn't make sense because they are perfect devotees. And one thing with Uddhava is that he have already experienced, I mean, obviously being the best of the devotees in Dwarka, and then Krishna elevate him or allow him to enter Vrindavan, and the fact that Uddhava fully realized Vrindavan and became a Briyavasi in the form of a bush, of a grass. And his realization was most elevated and fits perfectly with the instruction of Lord Chaitanya of what is the identity of the soul. Gopi Bhava Bhartur Kamalayor. We are the Dasa Anudasa of the servants of the gopis. So that was his realization, and that's how he manifested that position. I want to be a grass, so I receive the dust of the lotus feet of the gopis. So that was back, you know, in the 10th canto. Now in the 11th canto, when Krishna is instructing him, is right as Krishna is about to leave this world. And so I remember my Guru Maharaj explains that this trying to understand the pastimes of Krishna with the linear time for a conditioned soul is always going to be a completely bewildering thing. But the fact is that he's already have realized the gopis, experienced the gopis, realized the position of the gopis, and accepted himself as, someone who is in the position of receiving their dust, the dust of their lotus feet. So to ask these questions doesn't make sense. And what to speak, you can ask the questions, but to be bewildered is even more, it doesn't make sense. But we know that Krishna makes these arrangements or orchestrates these arrangements in one sense for the benefit of people who really will become bewildered. And when you hear the things, it is bewildering in one sense, especially when you're conditioned, how in the world you are going to be, acting, how you're going to eliminate basically desires and attachments and all these things, and how you're going to act in such a way that there's absolutely no connection to yourself as a doer, like that.
To yourself
as a doer. So all these things are very bewildering. And then, okay, so you cultivate knowledge, but also none of these things will have the capacity to free you. So, okay, we understand, at least conceptually, that we surrender to Krishna, and then bang. But it also there have a gradual process. So you still will be serving, offering your work to Krishna in devotional service, still have certain, you using your nature. That's why in the conversation of Lord Chaitanya with Ramananda Roy, he asked the same questions. What's the best? Lord Chaitanya asked to him, and then he keep rejecting these different levels until he reached, the position of the gopis. So, and even go further, so the position of Srimati Radharani. So, it's bewildering. But nevertheless, these instructions then are there that clarifies it. Is actually revealing the highest level. But we have to be also aware that where we fit and how important, because many of these instructions are directed at the methodology to get there. So you explain that Krishna says that this highest position of devotion, Uddhava asked, and Krishna responded, someone who is constantly hearing and chanting and remembering him. So that's a methodology, that's the highest methodology. And in fact, indeed, I remember Indra Prabhu used to say this, that of the 9 limbs of devotional service, not only here, but in the spiritual world, the highest expression of bhakti is Maha Sankirtan, the chanting and the hearing of the glories of Krishna. So even in the Rasa Lila, that's what's taking place. Hearing and chanting, singing the glories of Krishna, and the expressions of, absorption on that. So, but there's all levels of devotees. Narada Muni is in the Dasya Ras. He is constantly chanting Narada Muni Bhajam, like that. Hanuman, Arjuna, Parento, Devaki and Vasudev, and then there's the gopis. So there are differences, although they are still, all of them are practicing the same thing. They all absorb. Uddhava is absorbed. So how is that he cannot understand these things, So anyway, I'm just trying to make sense too of.
Well, thank you very much for, verbalizing the processing from what was discussed. The point you're making that it's actually that supposed bewilderment, perplexity in the mind is arranged by Lord Krishna to allow others to be able to look more closely at these questions is certainly accurate, because you find the same kind of thing taking place with Arjuna, particularly at the beginning of the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he's saying something similar. His mind is a little confused by all the terms Krishna's thrown at him. And it's philosophical subject matter, so hence the concepts one has to grasp. But the piecing of it together provides a framework that guides one as one's making one's effort through the correct actions that allow one to move closer towards the goal of reaching Lord Krishna. So it's very pragmatic, the arrangement, and also kind of strengthening too, because as one's moving through one's devotional life, one can remember these particular areas that were questioned or examined, which also is of assistance as one's facing one's own hurdles in moving past certain learnt tendencies that are there. So that's the thought.
Sorry to grab the mic. You say this last thing in the past. I'm also trying to process this whole, because this is very elevated subject matter, especially when we discuss the position of the gopis, and then conceptually trying to make sense of it, The question here, when we're talking about, that in this chapter and the previous one, the glories of the gopis of Vrindavan, that what makes them different, what makes them supreme in their position of bhakti. And, Uddhava was able to observe that they were in their separation was, the type of absorption was very, 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 elevated, even to him. So, that type of sentiment of being completely devoid of everything when they're in separation with Krishna. But we saw Arjuna have some similar when Krishna left and Arjuna was completely devastated in the pastime that he returns to Hastinapuri after Krishna had departure. You know, he was completely devastated in separation. So those sentiments of separation, of absorption, of being with Krishna, is also experienced with a devotee like Arjuna, who is, you know, not in the same level of the gopis in terms of the intensity of that absorption. What makes the difference? Not necessarily that sentiment of separation. So we try to understand that from the perspective that makes sense to us. And in reality, you know, what Krishna is instructing us is that focus is almost like that. This is how I process it, and I'll finish with this. The instruction is we focus on the process that will bring us to that type of absorption, which is hearing and chanting. Hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. That's a reframe there of instruction. And but then to understand how. I mean, Uddhava didn't place himself in the position of the gopis. He placed himself as a blade of grass, you know, in the association of the gopis, not even a human body, just, you know, a blade of grass. So how is applied to us, regular devotees or devotees who are aspiring devotees? You know, that's the power. And to think about this type of devotion and things like that. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well, I guess it increases the sense of humility. So the sense of humility is a very necessary component to be able to actually comprehend one's minuteness in relation to Lord Krishna. It's very helpful. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, I don't want to take up too much time, but Vasubha Prabhu was saying, I mean, my understanding is there's countless stories in the Bhagavatam about like Ajmela. So regardless of how high our absorption is, we're still susceptible to fall down, right? So there's one angle to look at it where, you know, Uddhava's obviously is very elevated, Arjun's very elevated, but in times of extreme pressure from the material energy, we're still susceptible. So there's to be bewildered. And the way I'm looking at it from this verse, if you look at Uddhava says, I'm bewildered. There's because Krishna explains the philosophy to different levels of understanding of the jivas, there's different processes. So yes, it's good to be doing devotional service with some gyan if you're at that level. But the goal is to step by step incrementally move up the path, right? So sometimes we get confused to say, well, wait a minute, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I'm here now. So now I'm striving for this level of absorption. So now when you see the gopis, oh my gosh, that's the ultimate. When your attachment is only to Krishna. So that level is I'm trying to get to. But wait a minute, where am I again? What level am I at? And so that's the way I'm interpreting this thing. It happens to me all the time where I think I understand, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Do I do gyan as well or not, right? So because the instruction is for so many, like, you know, like in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, if you can't do this, do this. If you can't do that, do this, right? That verse. And that's because he's trying to encourage all of us to incrementally achieve the highest And so in that process, sometimes it's not linear. In that process, sometimes we take a step back to move forward. And that's where the bewildered is from my perspective. That's just my opinion on it. So, Hare Krishna.
Yeah. You know, what you've articulated, where one is monitoring oneself, that's what I'm understanding. And monitoring oneself is necessary because one has to examine one's motivations at all times. Because if what actually brings one to that liberated state where the modes aren't acting on one is the fact that one is able to function without some material desires in one's actions. So if that's the criterion, naturally there has to be introspection and self-monitoring that then is, because that's what you're highlighting, because then with the monitoring one actually can look, oh, am I falling prey to some learned patterns in my mind? That's the conditioning, you know, it's something that one's learned to function in a particular way and one does it repeatedly without even knowing, and it's like cyclical almost, you go through a whole like way of functioning. Or is it that I'm performing my actions remembering that this is actually for the purpose of pleasing Lord Krishna? So if one's actually doing that continuously, that self-monitoring, that is actually what is assisting one to move away from the old pattern of learned behavior, be it mental behavior, be it physical performance of behavior, that monitoring. It's the essential key in everything. So if one talks about being perplexed, it's because at a certain moment, I mean, not in the case of Uddhava, obviously, or in the case of Arjuna, but there is, well, maybe you could say in the case of Arjuna, he was taken in by a certain mood of compassion towards family members that were on the opposing side, that now it was going to, as part of his Kshatriya duties, so within the Varnashram system, his duty was going to be to actually kill those very same family members. So he found himself moving into the position of the compassion, the affection bond is there, so then naturally compassion follows that. So he then had the perplexity because it's coming into conflict with, you know, that learned pattern. Compassion goes along with a loving relationship, whatever the level of that relationship is. So that's why it becomes, you know, which is what you've been pointing to, the necessity for monitoring. You know, why are you going to be functioning in a particular way, and why are you making a decision in a particular way? Is it the learned pattern, the association in the mind, or is it that it's for spiritual advancement? What is actually the correct course of action? So in Arjuna's case, he had Krishna reminding him what is the correct course of action. The duty overrode that personal relationship and the compassion that arose from it, because he was choosing to step away from duty because it was running into conflict.
Archetype of the marginal energy is the oscillation from material to spiritual energies, right? To associate with either or. So that's the conundrum. That is the process of self-realization, is to limit, you know, that oscillation between material and spiritual. And so from what I'm taking away is, even at the highest levels, that archetype is still there. And so we have to be in guard and watch for it until the highest level, when we can transcend completely. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it, is because we're a marginal energy, we're designed to go back and forth. So we make a little incremental process in spiritual life, just like that's what Krishna says also, like if a person is truly trying and doing devotional service from their heart, even if they fall down, they're still considered a saint, yeah? So I think that for me, it's all tying together.
Yeah, because the time is short, I guess we may have to continue the conversation elsewhere, but I just want to say that in one sense, it's not exactly an oscillation between material and spiritual, because of the fact that one has the grinding of singing the names of Lord Krishna, chanting the names of Lord Krishna. That is actually what's keeping a continuum running, actually. You're on that continuum, but it's the learned patterns pull one a particular way. So there is a continuum by virtue of the fact that one can hold on to the holy name and that connection with Lord Krishna. There is a continuum, but the learned patterns will surface throughout. So one has to appeal to Lord Krishna, and that's what these great personalities do. They appeal to Lord Krishna. Explain this. Why is this way? What should be done in this situation? So thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.